And we're also making a recording. Just, is that okay?
Of course. Yeah, definitely.
So I am thrilled to welcome Chelsea back with us, though many of you know Chelsea. She grew up in our congregation. Um, she's Judge Daniel Shelton's daughter, so I can still get away saying that too, right?
Yes. I
She
will
went to
always be her
Chicago
baby.
and got degrees at Harvard and at Brown. I'm going to let
Brown
the
and
rest,
Johns Hopkins.
Bronze and John Hopkins. I apologize.
Yep.
Um, and look, she and her sister always stood out, not only because of their height, but also because of how incredibly intelligent and eloquent they were. And so I am thrilled, Chelsea, to welcome you back. And I'll let Susan, who is our Director of Lifelong Learning, who I think all of you who have met Susan by now too, though I don't know, Chelsea, if you've met Susan.
No, I don't believe so.
So she'll make the rest of the introduction. And just thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Of course. My pleasure.
So the context, and then I'll turn it over to Susan, that it has been clear to me for a long time that of the American Jewish population, I would guess there are between, and Chelsea, you can correct me, 600,000 to 700,000 Jews of color,
Hmm.
which comes to
Probably
somewhere,
closer to 1 million, actually.
really. So
Yeah.
it's larger than 10%. It probably then approaches 15 to 20% of the American Jewish population is not all Ashkenazi folk like me. Okay. And um, to my sadness, we still have difficulty welcoming other Jews in with us. And so I was very honest with Chelsea and said, can you talk about the difficulties and challenges sometimes of a Jew of color, especially working with the rest of us Jews, the rest of us Jews. So Chelsea was kind enough to come. She's here as part of ADOT. I'm going to turn the rest over to Susan if I haven't taken everything away from her already. But Chelsea, thank you again.
Of course.
After living abroad and on both United States coasts, while serving in both the education and health fields, Chelsea returned to Wisconsin frustrated with the outcomes and policies in both sectors. Motivated, Chelsea shifted her focus to politics, where she felt her background would propel and enable her to make the most change in this world. A native Wisconsinite, Chelsea most recently helped Ed Falone in his bid for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and her mom, Judge Danielle Shelton, who became the first Black woman elected to a county judgeship in Wisconsin. Chelsea's current passion lies in the challenge to elect a Democrat in the most Republican district of Wisconsin, which was held for over 40 years by its incumbent. The fight to remove a Senate majority leader from representing Wisconsin and Washington, D.C. is the type of challenge that Chelsea relishes. As a Black woman and a Jew, she is no stranger to navigating spaces with conflicting identities. As Rabbi said, she has degrees from both Brown and Johns Hopkins, is a former public school teacher, and was also the youngest manager of the largest hospital network in Hawaii before she decided to impact her home community on a broader scale. Her profession is her passion, electing overqualified candidates to Wisconsin's most important offices. Chelsea brings passion, a desire to learn, and enthusiasm to this world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I won't talk about politics, obviously, because that's not what I'm here for today, but I want everyone to feel like this is a safe space. If you have ever wanted to ask questions of a bluish person, that's what I call myself, Black and Jewish, now's the time. I'm a stand-in for Lenny Kravitz. So feel free to ask me any questions. And what I'll do is I'll just share what I've encountered with this identity since I was born. So my mother raised my sister and I Jews as Jews. We started off going to shul at the location across the street from UWM over on the east side. And ever since we were little, we were the only Jews of color for the entire congregation. I don't remember very many biracial Jews in the area. And the good thing, though, is that we had Rabbi Berkson. And I don't know if he realizes this, but I had a single mom. So I already felt kind of ostracized because this was the 90s and single parent homes weren't as common. And on top of that, I was a Black girl and Jewish. So I felt completely marginalized. And Rabbi Bergson was kind of one of the only stable male figures in my life. And I looked up to him more than just a rabbi. He was almost like a father figure to me. And and I think because of the warmth and the type of welcoming environment that was created at Congregation Emmanuel, I very rarely felt othered, except for in my Hebrew class. And that was just because kids are mean, kids bully each other. That's a standard thing. I remember being picked on, but I don't think it was because I was Black. And I think part of that reason was my mom knew that we needed to have a community who knew us, and we became familiar faces. So my sister and I mean, I see tons of recognizable faces right here, people who were at my bat mitzvah, or people who I saw in the gift shop, or people who I've seen on high holidays. So I think because of that, we didn't feel like an anomaly being Black Jews at Congregation Emmanuel. But I did know, obviously, that we were probably one of the only Black people in the room at many times, or in temple, or absolutely in our Hebrew classes. So I like to joke, I had our bat mitzvah, and I had the celebration afterwards at the temple. And then I was like, what do Black people love to do? We love to skate. So we went to skate land right after that. And my mom sent me to Sunday school the next morning after my bat mitzvah. And I was so upset. And Rabbi said, what are you doing here? I said, my mom thinks that I am just need to be even more dedicated now that I'm a full Jewish woman. So I will say, though, that I did not enjoy being Jewish growing up, because I did not see other people who looked like me. And that had nothing to do with Congregation Emmanuel. That was just because most of the Jews we ever knew or saw were Ashkenazi, and they could trace back their roots to, all the way back to Russia and the pogroms. And I couldn't do that. And that is because I'm Black. A lot of my history was lost when my ancestors were brought over on a slave ship and stolen. So after my confirmation in high school, I basically shed my identity of being a Jew. I did not feel connected. I did not want to go to temple on the high holidays. And I didn't keep in contact with any of the Jewish friends that I had made growing up at Congregation Emmanuel. However, when I got to college, I noticed that I needed a community. So what did I do? I immediately went to the Hillel on Brown University's campus. And it was there that I felt, oh, okay, this is where I should feel more included, because I do have a Hebrew name. I did have a bat mitzvah. I feel as if I'm a full-fledged Jew. And it hurt me because I felt even more ostracized, because now I'm entering a community of people who have not seen Black Jews, who did not grow up going to shul with me, who did not go to my bat mitzvah. And the questions of, are you really Jewish? How are you Jewish? What makes you Jewish? It was like the Spanish Inquisition, and it was too much. So I did not participate in any Jewish activities at all in college until probably my senior year, when my mom said, you better go on your birthright, because you are not going to be able to in a couple of years. And once again, the fear of being othered came up again. And I did not want to go on a trip to Israel with a bunch of white Jews who would ask me over and over again, how did you wind up here? Who's Jewish in your family? Did you even go to Hebrew school? And so my mom, what do parents do when they have two kids? You go together. So she said, you're going to go with your sister. And that made the experience 10 times better. And we went on our birthright trip together. And it started off pretty bad, because you are questioned by the Israeli, I don't know if it was the flight attendants or the police or who it was at the airport, but they do question you before you get on that plane to make sure you are actually a Jew. And my mom was livid because they questioned my sister and I for much longer than they questioned all the other kids on the trip. They asked, what's the name of your rabbi? What's the name of your congregation? Who's your cantor? Can you sing the Ve'ahavta? When was your bat mitzvah? I mean, it was intense. And my sister was almost in tears. And thankfully, I mean, we had gone to Hebrew school for years. We had gone to Sunday school for years. We passed the test with flying colors. But my mom was very upset, and she called the Jewish Federation, I believe, and she said, you know, it's crazy that you guys don't realize that there are Jews of color in this world, especially going to Israel. How dare you treat my two Black Jewish daughters as if they were trying to go on some free ride trip to Israel? And so that's the trip started off kind of on that bad note. But by the time we got on the bus and we wound up in Tel Aviv, my sister and I realized we were more Jewish than half the kids on the trip. Half the kids were like, oh, I never had a bar mitzvah. Oh, I celebrate Christmas. So I don't know. I don't have a rabbi. And it was just so funny for my sister and I to realize that I think because my mom wanted us to belong so badly and have a community so badly that we wound up being more connected to the Jewish community than we thought we were. So we wound up leading prayer. We wound up, you know, sharing more stories about shul and our rabbi and our cantor than all these kids who grew up in wealthy Ashkenazi Jewish families in New York. So that was a big eye opener for me. And I would say after that trip is when I felt proud of my Jewish heritage, because I realized that I am just as Jewish as anybody else. And I can feel comfortable in Israel. I felt, it was funny because we were visiting one of the, I think it was one of the Roman temples, and we saw one Black boy walking by, and he saw us, and my sister and I saw him, and we all went like this. We threw up the Black power fist and we ran up to each other. We were hugging and crying and kissing like, oh my God, there's another one. And everybody was just clapping and cheering, and it was great. And, you know, a lot of people just thought my sister and I were Ethiopian Jews. Never got this kid's name, but it was funny because he was probably one of the only Black American Jews that we saw on the entire trip, but it was comforting. So we came back, and that is, as I mentioned, when I became more proud of my Jewish identity. So what did I do? I immediately connected with the McKinney family, you know, Shahana and Harriet McKinney, and became a member of ADOT, which is a Midwest Jews of color type of collaborative where we seek out other Jews of color who feel very proud of their Jewish identity or who have felt ostracized in the Jewish community, to bring us all together and say, we exist and we're here. I also am proud to be a board member of Tikkun Ha'ir. I got asked to be on the board of Tikkun Ha'ir earlier this year. So, and I gladly accepted that honor, and I was happy that people have recognized my, I guess, my presence in this city as being a Black Jew. And I also just started participating more in, you know, the Jewish activities that Shahana and Harriet organized, or, you know, actually wanting to go over to Mrs. Zuckerman's house for high holidays. Hi, guys. And I felt more proud, and I felt as if this wasn't something to be ashamed of. This was something that I can claim, and I shouldn't have to be embarrassed by it or worried, because I can speak on being a Black Jew, and I can speak on honoring that part of myself and not feel as if I am a fraud, because that is probably the biggest feeling that myself and my other Jewish friends who are people of color feel, is we feel like frauds. We feel like we're going to be questioned on how we came to be a Jew. And that's the worst feeling in the world. And I have no problem explaining to people, because I feel like it's my duty to share with curious people how it's possible to have this, melange of different types of Jews that exist and that are here and loud and proud. So I have no problem explaining how I came to be Jewish and the type of activities I participated in growing in, and I'm a little less offended. And now with anti-Semitism on the rise, I am even more like, I am a Jew, so watch your mouth. And it always throws people for a curve because, I hang out. I mean, this is Wisconsin. I hang out with people who make jokes about Jews, or I've been in areas where Jews were the butt of a joke. And I'm like, don't make any assumption about me, because I actually will call Rabbi Berkson and he will school you on why that is wrong. So here I am, a happy, proud, bluish woman. And I'm honored that I was asked to participate in this, because I think it's very important for us to stick together. And one of the Tikkun Ha'ir board meetings, we talked about how white people have rarely came together to uplift communities that don't look like themselves. And the one community that has remained resilient over and over and over again is the Jewish community. I mean, people hurt us and we strike back harder and we're stronger and we're better. And the only other demographic that I can think is like that and has that type of resilience and strength is Black women. So I'm very happy to have this identity, and I'm very proud of it. And yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. I think everyone's trying to figure out if
Chelsea.
Hi, Mrs. Zuckerman.
I love you and miss you.
I love you and I miss you. I'm sending you a virtual hug.
Me too.
Chelsea,
Yes.
it is true that your mother's mother was Jewish, right?
Correct. Yes.
Give us some background on that, please.
Yeah, I definitely can do that. So my mother's family, my maternal grandmother actually came from Sweden. So they emigrated through Canada, and I always wonder who would think to settle in Wisconsin. Well, people who come from cold climates, and that is my Swedish side. So they settled in northern Wisconsin, and then they eventually moved to Milwaukee. But my grandmother had a really bad relationship with her mother because she made children with men of color. My mom's dad is Black. My aunts, their fathers are either Mexican or Black, and my grandma was disowned from the family for that. So she lost touch with her family. And this was in from the 1940s to the 1960s, where my grandma just cut her off. And I'm talking like, when she saw that her grandchildren were biracial, she would come to the house and take birthday gifts back. She was doing that type of stuff. So we lost that type of heritage and figuring out where did Judaism come in. But my mom does say that when they lived in, Northern Europe, that they did practice Judaism, but my mom wasn't raised practicing any religion. But she said that when she was pregnant with me, she thought, what is a community I can go back to and raise my daughter in? And she said she went to churches and they were like, oh, we'll pray for you. We'll make sure you don't go to hell. And she said, I didn't like that feeling of I had to be really good in order to go to heaven. And she said the only place where she felt really accepted was when she went to Temple across the street from UWM.
Another bird.
She said, I'm going to raise my children Jewish.
Mazel tov.
Yeah.
Norm, I thought I saw your hand.
I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but you haven't talked at all about how your African American friends and relatives, etc., thought about you being Jewish. So I don't know what school you went to. I remember you from Temple, but I don't remember what school you went to. So I don't know if you ended up mostly surrounded by whites or
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up going to Shorewood schools. So again, my mom was just determined to make me be the most marginalized person ever. um, and again, when you grow up in a community and people and parents know you since you were a toddler, you're more accepted because people know you. But when I left, or when I started making Black friends, I am constantly told that we killed Jesus. That is all my Christian friends say. And I would say that there needs to be a lot of education in the African American community on who Jews are, what we do, what we stand for. And I think it's just so funny that, you can go to Brooklyn and you see two such very different communities living. It seems as if they're in harmony together. You've got the Jews from Brooklyn, and then you've got, the Black people as well, and they're in the same borough. But there's still so much ignorance. And I would say on both sides. So I'm really good friends with Angela Lang, who's the director of Black Leaders Organizing Communities in Milwaukee. And she noticed this ignorance. She noticed this, my Black friends just assume I'm rich. I'm like, I'll show you my student loan debt. My Black friends assume that, I am just this greedy type of person. When they find out I'm Jewish, after they make the Jewish jokes and then I check them, then the assumptions just come, and some of the bashing comes with that too. So what Angela did was she took all of the staff members of Block to the Jewish History Museum in Milwaukee. And she said it was very eye-opening for all of them, because they realized, wow, Jews have actually been oppressed just like we have. Just because, they may seem to be at the top of the totem pole in some sectors, we know what it's like to be oppressed. We know what it's like to deal with massive prejudice. We know what it's like to be othered. And I think the more we can open up Black people's eyes to that, Black Christian Blacks, the more we can have a little bit more solidarity together. And I hope that Tikkun Ha'ir, we're presenting the idea of doing a virtual tour of the Milwaukee's African American History Museum, so that we can see that we've actually got more in common than we think. I think the hatred part just comes in because most Jews that they see on TV or that people know of are Ashkenazi, which means they have white skin, which means they have benefited a lot of times. And a lot of people, a lot of my white Jewish friends bristle at the fact of thinking that they have been privileged, but privilege comes in many different forms. I'm privileged because I have a college degree. I'm privileged because I didn't grow up in an abusive home. I'm privileged because I have a job right now. So when you tell white Jews that they are privileged because they have benefited from the color of their skin, that can kind of ruffle some people's feathers. But I have to explain to them that, look, yes, you are Jewish. I am not trying to take away the fact that your family has dealt and you have dealt with prejudice and ostracism. But at the end of the day, when you walk into a room, people don't know your Jewish identity. They usually just see you as a white person, which means you're not going to experience the effects of systemic racism that I feel when I'm at a wedding and I notice I'm the only Black friend out of 200 people. And that is palpable. So that's where we need to have these type of conversations. And a lot of people say, well, how do we get rid of this? Exposure. It's just plain exposure. Yes, we can have forums like this, which is great, and we can talk about it. And I'm happy that people are asking questions and people want to learn, but make a Black friend, make a Jewish friend, go to a Black neighborhood, go to a Black business, go to a Jewish owned store, because when you're exposed, that xenophobia will decrease. And most of this xenophobia comes from fear, or anger will really just come from fear. And I think that the more diverse you can have your friends and your employees and the places you solicit and frequent, the less fear you will have, because you can see that we all are alike. I know that it's for some people feel like the America is not in a good place right now, but I really think that most people are good. And I like to say we all have a favorite color and we all have a favorite movie. And we all just want to be healthy and we all just want to be safe, regardless of our identity or our race.
Mhm. Chelsea,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. Actually, as part of humanity, we have more in common than differences. So thank you for your sharing.
Yes.
And I'm Chinese ethnically, but I walked into the synagogue in July 2017. And I told myself, no matter where I go, I'm minority. So it doesn't matter. I just walk in bravely. And I have more Jewish friends in this North Shore Milwaukee area than my Christian friends. And I just love diversity. Thank you for your sharing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
And I'd like to add on that because, with the Black Lives Matter movement gaining a lot of traction right now, I feel like there's people have varying opinions on it. But what I will say is if you are on the side of realizing that this is a humanity issue, this is not a political issue, that
Darn right.
want to feel included and equal and respected, then I need you to speak up for us when we're not in the room. I need you to be an ally, even if you don't have Black friends. I need you to be that ally in that board meeting, even if there's not a Black person at the table, because I can talk until I'm blue in the face about racism to a white person or prejudice, but it's actually probably going to sound better and be more effective coming from someone who looks like you. So I actually had a lot of white friends reach out to me when the protests started, saying, "Oh, Chelsea, I'm so sorry I called you the N-word that one time. I'm so sorry I made this joke about Jews." I said, "Great, that's fine. I'm glad you're realizing this and thinking about this now, but I need you to carry that over when I'm not around you. I need you to check that racist uncle at Thanksgiving. I need you to say something when you're in line at the gas station and you notice that you're being treated differently than someone who appears to be Muslim and is standing in line behind you. Because when you speak up for other people who don't look like you and you check someone who does look like you, it's actually probably going to be more powerful."
Chelsea, tell us more about Adot, could you?
Yes, definitely. So Adot was founded by Shahana McKinney, who is another Jew of color. She's a big activist and leader in the state of Wisconsin. And it's 1 year old, so it's a baby. And what we have been trying to do is just connect different Jews of color, have varying events, especially around the high holidays. I know that they did something yesterday at Alice's Garden in Milwaukee. And we've noticed that a lot of times these Jews of color that are trying to be involved, they're actually kids. They're actually a lot younger. And one of their parents is a Jew who is white, and one of the parents is probably someone who practices a different religion. So we are classified as a nonprofit. We don't have, we're not like an LLC or anything like that, but we do solicit for fundraisers or solicit for donations and have events. And we actually have another subsector called JWalk, Jewish Women of Color. And we led the Women's March in DC actually in, when was that? January of 2019, I believe. So Adot is gaining its foothold right now. And what we're just trying to do is promote awareness that we're here and that we exist. And that, out of the 12 tribes of Israel, whether or not you come from one of the tribes that was in Africa or whether or not you converted, it's trying to ensure that we don't feel as alone. So we've got, as I mentioned, various events. It's been obviously not as present right now because of COVID, but it's a Midwest based organization. So we've got members in Milwaukee, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, and Minneapolis right now. And I can also post the website or send the website and you guys can share it later so that people can look at it. Yeah. Another member who is very prominent that some of you might know is Kai Mishlove.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chelsea,
Mm-hmm.
tell us what the ADOT stands for, please.
So the ADOT, I mess it up sometimes. So let me go to the website so I make sure that I'm saying it properly, because I don't want to give you guys the wrong acronym. And there's a Facebook page too that I can post in the chat right now so that you all can look at it. Let me put it up.
Okay.
I will put that in the chat for everyone. And the ADOT stands for, let me get to the website because I actually forget sometimes.
That's all right. You're human like the rest of us.
Exactly, right? Gosh, yeah, you know what? We've just been saying it for so long. I know I should know this, but I can't even remember it right now. I apologize.
That's all right.
But if
You'll
you
let
go
us
to the
know.
website, I can put the website in the chat right now too. And here it is. And if you go to the website, that's Shahana's son right there. Shahana married a man by the name of Bill Baldwin, who was
Right.
an attorney in Milwaukee, but now he's an attorney in Madison.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
Continue on, sweetheart. You're doing well. We're proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
Is there any role that you feel would be helpful for Ashkenazi Jews to take either in ADOT or elsewhere?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that could help, people don't like doing this, but just to be blunt, donations always help because that would allow us to get more staff members who can promote this message and promote awareness. Another thing is if we do have events, show up. I mean, it's not closed off to just Jews of color. Anyone can come, anyone can participate. And I think, again, if we have more people who don't look like us, but supporting us, that is, to me, that is a really good form of allyship. And then another thing is just mention us, promote this type of awareness so that people know that there is this community that is trying to grow. And those are just some basic things. Yeah. And as I mentioned, earlier, have those difficult conversations because, when you're uncomfortable, that's usually where the learning happens. So conversations about ADOT existing or supporting them or Jews of color being present in Milwaukee and the Midwest area, just general awareness will, again, as I mentioned, help people realize that they've probably been exposed to more people who have just as much in common with them than they thought, more than they thought.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. Do you know if the Milwaukee Jewish Federation has any involvement with ADOT?
I know that they reached out to us. I work with a woman named Anna Goldstein. So she's been in communication with me about making sure that we cross collaborate about certain events. I know that they were trying to do something about getting the vote out and ensuring that Jews of color were voting because, as we know, there have been lots of systems in place to ensure that people of color don't have equitable access to voting. And so on top of that, adding being a Jew, you deal with people who have conflicting identities or who feel as if they don't have a community where they can feel comfortable. And we believe that will also translate into how they feel about politics and how they feel about policies and leadership. So I believe they are trying to do something about getting the vote out and just ensuring that we promote each other's Facebook events And, it's so difficult with a pandemic going on, making sure that people feel they're not forgotten. So what I like to say is we're laying the groundwork to hit the community hard, hopefully sometime next year.
So
Thank you so much. I'm so proud of you as
Oh,
always.
thank you.
Love you.
I love you too, Mrs. Zuckerman.
So Chelsea, if you were trying to figure out what you were looking for the meaning of Ada, Adot before.
Yeah.
So Ada, it's a camp word often because it's a group or a gathering or a community. Okay, so for those of us who go to camp, there's the Ada, and the Rosh Ada, that's the head counselor so that's what Adot means.
There we go.
What's your guess of the number of Jews of color in the Milwaukee area?
I would say probably around 100. It's very small. Yeah. And honestly, the way that we've been connected is the McKinneys kind of started this, because they've got such a big family and they're all pretty active in the community. And when Adot started, they were able to reach out to more people and pull them in. So I went to Shahana's daughter's bat mitzvah in Madison. This was pre-COVID, so it must have been fall sometime last year. And I was just crying because I was just so happy to see people who looked like me. And I felt the same way when I went to the Women's March, because what we had all these people, all these Jews of color, all these women, along with Ashkenazi, and we had even people who were Asian, and of course some Africans. And it was so powerful, you guys, that I was just crying. I just couldn't stop crying and realizing that the world is much more diverse than we think it is. And it's tough seeing that living in Milwaukee. I mean, we're the most segregated city in the US. My current partner, he's 30 years old. He's a Black man from Milwaukee. He had never seen Bradford Beach until he was 18 years old. And he grew up on 160th and Capitol. So a little bit past, Mayfair. You've never seen Bradford Beach. And I think we can attribute that to a few things. One, transportation. If you don't have good transportation throughout the city or throughout your state, people aren't going to be able to see other places. Two, again, it's hard for Black people to feel welcome when they go to Shorewood and they're immediately pulled over if they're trying to go to Atwater Beach or Whitefish Bay and they're trying to go to Doctors Park. If they don't see people like them, or they're being targeted and they're being literally profiled, they're not going to venture to the East Side. So, and my mom said the same thing. She was so mad at her mother because my mom grew up in the area where white flight was kind of taking place in the 60s. So she remembers moving into a home in Wauwatosa. My grandma signed the lease. She brings all her kids over the next day. And when the landlord saw the kids, or a neighbor called the landlord, she knocked on the door. They hadn't lived there for less than 24 hours and said, "You've got to go. You've got a bunch of N-word babies and you can't live here." And this was 1970 in Wauwatosa. So she never ventured to the East Side. She just remembers being pushed out further and further and further deeper into Milwaukee County. And I have another story of a friend who mentioned the white cross being on the signs in Wauwatosa because they still have that religious symbol. And she woke up to crosses being burned in her front yard. And this was early 2000s. Yeah. So these conversations, you guys, are more powerful than we think they are. We need to continue to have them. I'm cautiously optimistic because people, whether they support the Black Lives Matter movement or not, they are being aware and being exposed to the voice of the unheard. And I just hope that Milwaukee isn't on these lists next year of worst place to raise a Black child, most segregated city. Also our transportation. I mean, everything that had to do with the rail, with the train and the hop, those are all things that were supposed to make our community less segregated, and it hasn't happened.
Right.
The hop is only accessible to people who live over on the east side in the nice condos or who might head to downtown. Things like that.
Yeah.
How's your mom's experience been on the bench with people
Yeah.
she serves with? And
Great question. For those of you who are following her election, it got pretty ugly at the end because she was running against a white man who, and this is just a fact, who was appointed by Scott Walker. And a lot of lawyers and judges felt like it was wrong for this person to run because who's mostly prosecuted for crimes in Milwaukee? Black and brown people. What are most of the judges and DAs? White people. So right there's a big flaw when the justice system that prosecutes you looks nothing like you, or the system that's supposed to protect you and make sure you have a fair trial or make sure you have fair sentence doesn't look like you. So people banded around her, and her opponent's campaign team attacked my mom and said that she had a record because she got into a fight with my father in a Oconomowoc, regular couples dispute. Someone called the cops, and this went on my mom's record. And my mom said, now, if this was a white woman arguing with her white boyfriend in Oconomowoc, do you think this would have been on her record? And this happened in like 1991 and used against her for running for judge. This was blatant racial profiling. And for them to sling this type of mud at my mom said, you're racist. You're running a racist campaign. And the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel tried to run a smear campaign against my mom. Her campaign manager basically cussed out the reporters and said, get out. You're asking Danielle questions that you would never ask her white male opponent. And his campaign manager got fired for that because people were just so outraged. So now that she's on the bench, she feels, again, I think she feels a little bit alone because there are very few Black judges in Milwaukee. And a lot of judges did not support her. So she's always begging her friends of color who are lawyers to run for judge because she's like, this is how we do it. You know, we need to make sure that the system is representative of the people it serves. So a few of the judges are like, Danielle, we're so happy you're here. Thank you for being one of those voices for the unheard on the bench. But she still deals with, judges stonewalling her or little petty high school cliquish type stuff, not being invited to lunch, weird stuff like that. But as you know, one of the chief judge, Maxine White, said she couldn't support my mom during it because she wanted to be obviously nonpartisan and she can't support any type of person running for judge. But when my mom got elected, she said, I'm so happy you're here. And the way you ran your campaign is how everyone should run their campaign. And my mom won by a landslide. And she is doing exactly what she said she would do on the bench. When COVID hit, she called up every attorney. Her office called every attorney who had someone in jail or in prison for a petty misdemeanor or a nonviolent crime. And she said, get them out. If they can get out on bail, let's get them out. They do not need to sit in jail during COVID and be exposed and be away from their family for having a dime bag of weed while we're talking about legalizing marijuana. It's just ridiculous. So people may call her an activist judge, but everything she's doing is legal. And I think that we need more, and obviously I'm biased because I'm her daughter, but I do think she's a great judge. And I also think she's a great mom. And I think we need more judges like her who have either know what it's like to be a person of color. And she was a public defender before that. So most of her clients were poor Black and brown people. So now that she's on the bench, she knows what it's like. She knows what bail amounts can do to people. She knows what being in jail for a day can do to someone. They can lose their job. They can lose their livelihood. They can, lose a relationship. So that type of perspective is definitely needed. And I'm prepared to help her win again in 5 years.
Right.
And you inherit her smile.
I'm going to interrupt because unfortunately, we're going to have to end because we pick up again in less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
What's the best way, if people want to get in touch with you, Chelsea, what's the best way to do it?
Email me. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm on my phone all day.
Right. Chelsea V. Cross at Gmail, right?
Correct. Yep. I can post it in the chat right here so that everyone has it. I am a proud Wisconsin girl. I'm proud to be from Milwaukee. I love being an active community member. So even if you want to email me a type of question that you felt uncomfortable asking now, please be my guest, and I'm happy to talk to you guys, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Chelsea.
so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. You were terrific.
Good, you on to the easy fast.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Thank you,
we'll start
Chelsea.
about 10, if that.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
for your honesty.
Bye.
Us today.
So we're going to end this call and we'll open it up in about 5 or 6 minutes or so before the 3 o'clock service. See you soon.